Hello everyone! Thank you so much for joining me today for another art video. So I'm going to be trying out some new art supplies today. I have the Arteza Watercolor sketchbook here, and I am also going to be using the Arteza Real brush pens. With the Arteza Real brush pens, there is a water brush that comes along with it, so I will be using that as well. As you can see, I am sketching out a banana, and I just wanted to draw something simple to test out the art supplies, and for whatever reason, I had the urge to draw and paint a banana. I like bananas. They're not like my top fruit or anything. I'm glad that they exist. They're good to have around. Anyway, generally speaking, after finishing up a sketch, I like to use my Kneaded eraser or some other type of eraser to lighten the sketch back up so that it won't show through as much with the paint. My favorite way to do this is rolling the Kneaded eraser like so and then rolling it on the page. This will pick up the pencil marks without actually damaging the paper. Very useful. And I just love kneading the eraser. Ooh, nice. And here is the water brush pen and the real brush pens that I'm going to be using from Arteza. Using this water brush, I was pleasantly surprised. I actually really like the water flow, and it works just as well, if not better, than the water brushes that I'm used to using, which are the Pentel water brush pens. I was pretty excited for about 2 seconds with these pens, and then I realized that all of the pigments or paint had just come out into the water that I had laid down. So now I am soaking up all that water with my paper towel, and I'm gonna try again. It had already been a minute since I used this brush in the water initially, so I was a little bit surprised that it was still taking a while for the paint to come out, as you can see here. One thing I noticed is that these real brush pens are pretty dry, so it doesn't really get much juicier than what you just saw. I really had no idea how this supply was going to work. I assumed that they were going to work just like watercolors, so I really wanted to do some experimenting and find out. That is the reason that I started out with a layer of water down on the banana. I wanted to see if when I put the paint down, if it would spread the same way that regular watercolors do. And as we saw, not really. It just soaks up the water and then no more paint comes out. Now it was time to see how this paint would spread if I put the water on after I put the paint down. And it worked really well. Again, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, really, look at how nicely that yellow blended out. Now here starts the layering. I'm going back and forth between my real brush pens and my water brush. I want to keep my surface wet so that these pens will continue blending the same. One thing that is definitely the same as with regular watercolors is there is a lot of layering going on. So as I mentioned before, these pens aren't super juicy, so as you can see here, I'm going over the same places a few times to really get that paint to come out. And putting the paint down on the wet surface is making sure that it blends really softly as I put it down. The two green colors that I'm using are green tea and bright green. I'm switching back and forth between the two colors to get the balance that I'd like on the ends of the banana. This yellow is Bumblebee yellow. It is being used for my first layer of shading. I'm making sure to follow the curve of the banana, and that includes right here on the ends. Now I'm coming back with the water brush to blend that yellow out. Here I'm switching between the Bumblebee yellow, the lemon yellow, and the water brush. I am trying to achieve a smooth blend between the two colors, at least on this side that is closer to the light source. These colors do blend into each other very smoothly. Here's that Bumblebee yellow to touch up that shadowy area. Seems as though when I put the water down, it ends up making that particular area a little bit patchy. One interesting thing that I noticed about these pens is that when you're putting one on top of another, you are able to kind of push the pigments around. You can see that here, I'm blending the green into the yellow, but that yellow is really pushing that green pigment around quite a bit. Coming back to add some shading here, and I am using the lemon yellow to soften it. At some point I noticed that the bottom of the banana is a little thinner than the top, so I start to thicken it up here, and you'll see later on I go back several times to fix it up. Now this lovely brown that I'm using here is called Orange Rust. And you'll see that I am going to completely undo what I'm doing right now later on in the video, because I looked at more pictures of bananas and decided, you know what, no, I want the stem to be green. I don't want it to be brown. So that is going to be a really good example of how you can really push these colors around with this supply. It's kind of cool actually. And right here is where I start that process. So again, I don't know how this supply works, and I'm using it how I would use watercolors. So putting down some water, waiting a second, and then dabbing it to try and get whatever pigment is on the page up. And that worked a little bit. You can see the color on the paper towel. Using my base color of lemon yellow, I am going around the edges. I'm thickening it up a little bit, cleaning it up, and I'm going to be using this yellow to blend that green out. And I started pushing that brown and green pigment out of the stem of the banana with this yellow. Since I'm experimenting, I wanted to see how much shading I could get with the same color layering on top of itself. And you can see it adds a little bit of shading, but for the most part it just makes the colors way more vibrant, which I'm into that. I love that, so that's cool with me. I noticed the shading wasn't quite even on this part of the banana, so I decided to try and even it up a little bit. And yeah, so this is where I started to freak out, because look at how bad that top of the banana looks. What? This is definitely the ugly stage. My painting's puberty. Usually it ends quicker than this one. This one's puberty lasts a while. And that's okay, because it comes out the way that I want it to in the end. I'm using that lemon yellow to try and push the pigments around, like I figured out that I could do before. Now that definitely made a little bit of a difference. Coming back with my greens to try and even out some of that patchiness. And I'm starting to go over that brown with the green to push the brown out of that area. Blending with my lemon yellow a little bit, just trying to fix up the patchiness that I had created here. Lots of panic happening in my brain. I am just freaking out. Now right about here is where I make a nice big mistake. Or I guess I just consider it a mistake. Ultimately, everything turned out fine, so whatever. But I'm laying this water down and I only put it on part of the banana. What was I doing? Look at that. So that was my Bumblebee yellow. Yeah, don't know what I was thinking. So now I'm trying to fix that, make it blend more evenly. It's hard to watch yourself make mistakes and comment on it. It's kind of weird. Anyway, it's something that we all, I'm sure, love. Little pieces of lint on our pages. Coming back in with that lemon yellow to try and fix the bottom part of this banana, because it was looking a little crazy there for a minute. I feel like throughout this entire piece, I'm just trying to clean up the edges and even out the thickness of this banana. And I'm not even sure that I got it at the end. It might still be uneven, whatever. Real things are uneven. I have to remember that. Real things are uneven. Coming back in with my greens to fix this yellow. Blend it in with the other green on the ends. Now I'm taking that green and still trying to repair the patchiness up at the top. But now you can see it's actually starting to work a little bit. Now that the first bit of green I put down had soaked in, putting more green down, using the water to try and blend it a little bit. It seems like using the water does help blend a little bit, but then there's the risk of that crazy patchiness that I keep ending up with. And it's interesting because I just did not see it when it was happening in real time, but looking back at the time lapse, I can so clearly see it. So I made sure to get water on my entire banana, and now I am going back with that Bumblebee yellow in order to darken and even out my shadow. Here I'm using that lemon yellow to try and keep that shadowy area nice and soft. So I am switching back and forth between the two yellows to achieve that. Right now the banana is looking pretty patchy, so that is why I'm kind of all over the place with what I'm doing here. I'm trying to fix all that patchiness up, get rid of it completely. I want this to be a smooth gradient in the end. The changes that I'm making right now are all really small, but they all add up and make a huge difference. I'm trying right now to use the pigment that's in the brush to push the pigment that's already on the paper around a little bit. Now, I don't think it was very successful, but that's okay. Probably need to go over that same spot a few times in order for it to be successful. Using the color green tea now and then coming back with lemon yellow to blend it. Okay, so one of the main things that makes these pens totally different from watercolors is the fact that you can kind of push the pigments around. That's also one of the attributes that makes these more like pens and markers, is that they're pushing pigments around, like you can see right here. This is where I'm really trying to get the green to take over on that stem. All of the steps that I have taken up until this point have helped a lot, but this is just kind of like soaking the paper in this pigment, so I feel like I'm really testing this paper right here and seeing, is this going to bleed through? I'm definitely expecting it to. And we will see at the end of the video, because I am going to show you guys the other side of the paper, so we will see how much or how little it did end up bleeding through. Here you can see I'm working on the blend between the yellow and the green again, and where I added those extra yellow parts, blended in really nicely with that green. Back to the stem again for more layers. And of course, I dropped my pen, typical, always dropping things. Something that I did start to notice was that when you're drawing with just the tip of the pens, there is a nice flow. So it feels pretty juicy. I mean, I'm not drawing particularly fast, so if you were drawing really fast, that might be different. Now I know I've been working this whole time to get the brown out of the stem, and here you see me adding some back in, but I'm using it just to shade around the stem, and that's it. And now I wasn't able to get like a great blend between the green and the brown, but that's fine. I didn't really need it in such a small area. Finally, we've gotten to one of my favorite parts, adding the little freckles? What do you even call these? Hold on. So I looked it up, and these are just literally called brown spots. They're brown spots on bananas. You would think that's pretty obvious, but here we are with me looking it up. All right, anyways, so I love this process. It's really fun. And so I'm adding these little spots up here towards the top and decided I hated it. So I'm just gonna make that like a bruise on the banana, which, I mean, bananas get bruised so easily. So I wanted this banana to have like all of the characteristics of a banana, and a bruise is a super common one. So very convenient to cover up the spots that I did not like. Here I'm using my water brush. I want to soften where I added that bruise, and I'm attempting to lift a little bit of the pigment while also like I'm trying to make it blend a little better. Like, I don't know if I can push the pigment, but either way, adding the water onto it blended it out a little bit, and I like the way that looked. So now I'm just going around and fixing up the edges before I start the background. When I first started filming the background, my camera ran out of memory, and I didn't realize it, so I kept painting for a little while. That brings us to where we are now. I'm starting out using Sapphire blue, and you can see that I go in with a darker blue, and that is literally called dark blue. So with the first layer, I put down the sapphire blue, I went in with the water brush, and then I came back with the dark blue around the edges and tried to blend those together. What I did in order to blend those colors together is I came back with the sapphire blue and kind of went over everything, and then came with my water brush and definitely went over everything. You can tell that it helped everything blend, but it also makes everything kind of uneven, which is not awesome. I'm not a fan of that. As you can see, the background was really a lot of back and forth between the sapphire blue and the dark blue and the water brush to try and make everything as even as possible. And you'll notice that the final layers on the background always end up being with the real brush pens because they blend together very nicely. I need to try and remember that for the future. But this darker color that I'm coming in with now is the darkest color that I'm using for my background, and it is actually Eggplant Purple. It's a really beautiful purple, and unfortunately in my footage it just looks darker blue. You can't tell that it's purple at all. Super annoying. So here's what that color actually looks like in real life. Apologies that the footage doesn't match. I tried to edit it to make it match, but I think I'm just not experienced enough at this to make it work. Either that or, I don't know, maybe it's impossible. Let's go with that. Makes me feel a little better. Now you can see the reason why I wasn't so worried about ruining my edges of the banana with the blues that I went in with for the background. I am using my Posca pens here. So I'm sure most of you know, but these are acrylic paint pens. And I actually did more layers than you can see in this video. I went over it a million times. I probably should have just gotten my gouache out or my actual acrylic paint to do this, but it was fine. I wanted to use the Posca pens, so I did, and it was fun. Even though I had to go around the outside a million times, I still enjoyed it. It's like sometimes the act of repetition is really therapeutic, and isn't that what art is about, a lot of the time? Alright, so I'm continuing on with my Posca pen to create some highlights on my banana. I'm using these to really emphasize the shape. Sometimes it's surprising how much dimension can be added from just a few little highlights. See, right here, this. Especially since a lot of the time on bananas, it's raised up in those parts. So I wanted you to be able to tell that that was a feature of this banana. And after adding those highlights and taking a step back and looking at this artwork, I decided that these shadows were just not enough. So I wanted it to be more intense. So I came back with my Bumblebee yellow to do that. This was a good experiment to see if the brown spots would end up smearing from the paint that I put on top of them. I'm trying to be precise with what I'm doing. I think I was fairly successful with that. I'm also using the color bright green here on the ends. With that, I'm just trying to add one last little bit of shading to the green parts. This color here is lemon yellow, trying to soften that edge. And now I figured I would try a little bit of an experiment, like this entire video is. But anyways, so I used the water brush, and since I had noticed that these real brush pens just sucked up the water from the page before, I figured, the ink isn't gonna go, or the ink or paint, whatever you want to call it, isn't gonna go into the water brush. The water is gonna go into these real brush pens. So I held the tips together, and that's exactly what happened. The water went into the real brush pen and it diluted that paint a little bit. So I used that technique in order to get some softer shading and to hopefully not smear the spots that I had already put down quite as much. Although you'll see they did end up getting smeared a little bit, but in the end I like the way that it looked. You can actually see it a bit right here. Using my water brush and both of my yellows just to go over the edges of my shading that I added, trying to make everything look how I want it to. And now I'm on to the final steps, adding the last highlights. This is always the most satisfying part of every single artwork. So what I'm doing right now is just putting down some paint with my Posca pen and then using my finger to smear it more, because I want it to be a little bit more transparent than it is when I just put it down. And this way it lets me get thinner lines if I like go fast enough and am able to kind of push that paint around with my finger a little bit. It doesn't always work either. Right here it doesn't work very well. And then on this other side it worked really well, just how I wanted it to. It was a little bit difficult to see what I'm doing here because my hand is just like blocking everything, because I need to hold the Posca pen basically straight up and down in order to do this. So sorry about that. And here's the finished piece. Now let's take a look and see if this paint bled through the paper. What do you know? It's actually not that bad at all. It only bled through a little bit, not even in the places that I would have expected it to bleed through. I thought it was going to bleed through on the banana where I had like soaked it with that green pigment, but I guess it bled through. I think it's because I used so much water and the pigment at the same time when I was doing that particular area of the background. So I mean, maybe that's the reason, maybe it's not. That's my speculation though. And here's what the color corrected piece looks like. So you can see there's a pretty big difference there. This camera did not pick up the purple at all. If you stuck around to the end of the video, you the real MVP. You rock. Thank you. And I would just like to say that you're gonna get some bonus footage of my baby Beatrix, my little baby girl. She's perfect, my little angel. Here she is relaxing underneath a blanket, tucked in nice and cozy for your enjoyment. And hers, if we're being honest here. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, and if you would like to see more content from me, go ahead and subscribe. It really helps me out. Once again, thank you so much for joining me today for this art video, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye! Just kidding, I'm back. I totally forgot to tell you guys that I really liked this paper. 100% approve. And as far as the real brush pens go, I really liked them. The colors were super vibrant. They might have been a bit dry going down on the paper, but they were packed with pigment, so I really enjoyed using them. And I'm definitely gonna make more projects with them in the future. I want to actually figure out how to use them properly, so I may end up making more videos with this supply in the future. Well, thanks for sticking around to hear what I have to say. Even though I almost forgot to tell you guys what I thought about the supply that this whole video is based around. They're good supplies. The real brush pens just take a little bit of getting used to, I think. Well, you may have noticed the background here is my Redbubble shop. So this is where you can buy any art prints or stickers or socks or any other products or merchandise with my designs on them. Right now I have 82 designs up, but I am going to be uploading more. So if you're interested in buying any products or merchandise that have my designs on them, I would like to invite you to check out my shop and see what there is available. There is definitely something there for everyone. I can tell you the t-shirts are super soft and the designs look really great on them. Also, I'm pretty excited about the zipper bags and the magnets. So there is something available at every price point. So if you aren't able to get something more expensive, then there's still something there for you. The stickers are amazing. I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through a couple of the designs that I really love. And again, I would like to invite you to check out my shop on Redbubble. I will have a link in the description of my video. I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.